got a different Wi-Fi connection, so I can hear you all now. I was having all sorts of problems there for a second.
Yeah, technology is always challenging, but we are live now. So welcome to our listeners. If you're watching us, drop us a note so we know you're here. David, Bob, thanks for joining again. The conversation. We did 2 episodes before, and we kind of set the stage with some content. But now it seems to be a good time to start talking with more people. So Jan, John, and Dirk, welcome to join us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My honor.
So I took some clips from your LinkedIn profile, so maybe we'll get a short introduction one by one. And the first one I have up here is from Dirk. So if anybody is interested, they can look you up here. But something that stood out for me on your LinkedIn profile is this little quote from "Only experts can find experts."
Exactly.
What do you mean with that?
Well, you have to understand what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not just posting crazy LinkedIn posts that maybe sometimes I think I annoy somebody. Now, in between, I work a little bit, and I'm working as an interim manager now for many years, and I launched a new interim provider company in February, which is called GAO Experts, which, by the way, means Global Automotive Operations Experts, as it is written. And my problem with the classical interim providers is that they come out of HR, finance, legal, and even less competence fields, and regarding this business, of course, what I mean. And they want to judge, or they want to find out with some crazy questions whether somebody is really capable to be a plant manager for an automotive plant, or a COO for a group of automotive plants, or a quality manager, or a logistics manager. And I think that cannot work, because they cannot really judge whether a specific person is really capable, or of what a specific person is capable of. Yeah. So this is basically what is behind that quote, that my partners and I, we have now in total 100 years of automotive experience in operations and supply chain, and we claim that we know a little bit what is the right kind of skill set to be successful there, and that's behind this quote.
All right, awesome. So you've been on Gemba, as a way of saying.
Lots of, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. All right, welcome. Our next guest is Jan Vriesbach from close to Groningen, I just learned.
Yes.
Jan, what I found in your LinkedIn profile, that you think it's important to have fun at work.
Yes, I do. Yes, we invest so much time of our lives in our offices or workplaces, and work should be fun. So then you are creative, then you're resilient, and you don't mind stupid words, or you can take care of yourself and your team. So fun is very important.
I like that. That's really good. That when I first got introduced to Lean, when it was still called world-class manufacturing and total quality management back in those days, that was the mantra that I got introduced to very early on, which was faster, easier, safer, and fun. And I didn't realise quite how profound that was until years and years later. But the fun bit, and I was told then, the fun bit is the most important part. And yeah, now I've done 20 years of studying in psychology. Now I know why.
Yeah, and the neuroscience and all, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it completely changes and shifts the connections in the brain. So yeah, it's very, very insightful. That.
Yeah, we work very directly with one of the inventors of Scrum, with Jeff Sutherland, and he always says, "Good Scrum is fast, easy, and fun. And if your Scrum is not fast, easy, and fun, then it's not good Scrum."
Wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Welcome, Jan. And our next guest is John Dennis. And what I found in your LinkedIn profile is something called Lean Blockchain. I never heard about that. So maybe you can talk a little bit to that.
Yes, so I'm interested in blockchain technology. I've been for a number of years and do believe it's going to be one of the major changes in the way that transactional processes work in the next few years. And it creates a lean process by cutting out intermediaries. And it also is lean because it is about consensus building between diverse departments or organizations or companies that all have to agree on a certain decision or a certain transaction. It can be used in many different ways, but to me, it has all of the hallmarks of something that would create a lean process.
Wow, interesting perspective.
Mm.
What I read a little bit about blockchain, but when I hear this negotiation about it, in my mind it brings up the association with Catchball from strategy deployment a little bit. So you need to somehow find some agreement on the subject matters.
Yes, very much so.
And I guess it's end-to-end openness. I mean, I don't know that much about blockchain, but I've got a colleague that's really up on it. But I've not really got that intuitive understanding of what it is. But I'm getting the feeling over time and snippets of information that it's about openness. It's end-to-end openness and open money movements and dealing and price ratings. And is that right, John?
Yes, and there's been too much talk about blockchain within the money finance side. So the cryptocurrency side has taken all of the news in the last few years, but there are now more and more applications which are non-financial, completely things like identity verification, product validity in supply chains or product tracking in supply chains. And there's some very good use cases.
Brilliant.
Awesome. I prepared a few sheets to set the stage and to summarize what we discussed about in the previous two episodes, and that kind of sets the stage. And then I would like to invite all of you to have just a discussion with some beer in our cafe, so to speak. But let's set the stage a little bit. What we have been talking about is first of all, about people. And you see here some head figures with a brain in it, and that's very much David's field. And he introduced us to BTFA to get us an introduction into neuroscience and psychology and to understand what's going on in the system that we are ourselves. And the next topic in there, it was leadership, which is very much Bob Moyani's field of study. How do people, leaders behave, and why do they behave? Do they behave in this way? And what I try to add to the equation is maybe we should also have a look at how followership works and how that interacts. So it's very much about studying the interactions between leaders and their followers, and at last but not at least the interaction between the followers among each other. And I think this image captures our discussions a little bit, and the shared field of our study is lean or continuous improvement with respect for people. So.
Yeah. And of course, just to complement that, Emil, that's a really good diagram to summarize a massive topic into one slide. But obviously, it's the interaction and the beliefs that leaders and followers have with systems and process. Yeah,
because I put BTFA on all the brains, right? I mean, every person in the system has this going on somehow.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interaction internally, but also with the environment, and some parts of the environment are made of people. So this is kind of a summary slide. If any of you wants to refer back to a previous slide we used, if you said I have all the slides at hand, but for now let's grab a beer and have a conversation. So
I
where do
have
you
all
want to
these
start?
things.
You have a beer. Cheers.
Dirk, I was just reading your LinkedIn post
You
this
you
morning.
already replied.
Yeah, I already replied. But about that, Dirk had an interesting post about we've been studying TPS for a lot of years and then the slowness to understand it. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that, because there is a slowness to understand it from leaders as well as from followers. And I'd like to hear your view of that.
Well, so I should start. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Specifically on this post.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I see these other posts, and all these other posts, sometimes they give me directly an idea of, okay, I need to write something about it. And this was this other post of this Brazilian guy. I do not know his name. He posted the Toyota house again, and then I saw that the foundation of his Toyota house was stability. And then I started thinking about TPS again and so on. And then I found another Toyota house from a very good lean consulting company that I know. And in their house, they had exactly that point. And they said, look, if you are looking superficially on TPS, it's just a tool set, it's just a Kanban, it's just a standard work, it's just SMET, it's just 5S, it's just Haichunka boards, but that's not it, because all these things were developed. That's one of my like, you can call it's a hypothesis or whatever, but I think maybe even unintentionally they did it, but I read it today with what I know about it. It was at the end, it was somehow developed to really respect the people, because all these kind of things solve a lot of problems that made in another company that has not this kind of system. You leave the people with out of material situations, poor equipment, scrap, rework, no development, very important, no development, people development, no problem solving skills increase, the people are just left, and this is for me what the true respect for people in the TPS should mean. And not, I had discussions in the past with people and they said, well, I respect people. I say to everybody, I say good morning. And I said, what do you mean? This is nothing special, This cannot be the respect for people that Toyota is talking about. And I still see this every day, that people are not really understanding what this respect for people, the very deep meaning behind it. And for me, the very deep meaning behind it is you have to develop people. And this is hard work. And this is really a lot of effort has to be put in. And I don't know any company that really understands that.
David, maybe you can comment on the notion here is basically superficiality. Why do leaders and followers basically look at things, superficiality, extract from the deeper context and just look at things as tools? And maybe you have some insight, and Jan and John after that, because this plagues so many type of transformation efforts of an organization, whatever it may be, the superficiality that is extracted.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to go at, so I won't take up all the time talking about, because you could set me off, Dirk, with that start. Crikey, I mean, the things, I mean, the there's 2 or 3 key quotes that I picked up on out of the original or the new translation from Mark Warren of the TPS manual, where he's been working with it for 10 years and trying to really dig into the deeper meanings and get the wording right in the Japanese translation. And what stood out for me was a number of times Taiichi Ono said through that book, the TPS manual, you've got to respect people's precious energy. You've got to really protect the people, and out of that respect, you will design solutions that make sure that if you're asking them to spend time away from their family, every second of every minute of their day will be contributing as much as it possibly can to the outcomes of the business that provides them their livelihood. So, and it's that deep philosophical, cultural, there's a lot of the preconditions that Bob talks about that lead to that mindset. So, I mean, all I'm saying that for is to completely and utterly agree with everything you've just said. Beyond that, I think from a psychological point of view, I mean, where do we start? Crikey, biases. We have things like primacy bias and recency bias and confirmation bias. And what that means is primacy bias, the things that you hear first, you'll stick to if it suits you and it confirms you as right in the world. You know, if that's not working for you, then you'll swap to recency bias, which is you'll swap to the last thing you heard in the world that confirms you as right. You know, so and confirmation bias is, you know, a part and parcel of all of that, which is our brains require more glucose energy to make adjustments than they do to do what we do on a normal basis. So it's energy intensive. It's not part and parcel of our defense and survival mechanism to want to change naturally, because we've spent years learning how to survive in our environment. So anything we can do to avoid change and and help our brains not have to consume that much more glucose, then we're going to do that. So, you know, anything that says, look, actually, I've heard about this makes me right, so we're going to do this because the rest of the market's doing it, which is tools and techniques approach. Of course, people are going to do that because it's easier, you know, and we all follow the path of least resistance, the same as every physical being on the planet, you know, whether it's mechanical or emotional.
And it confirms the biases, and also the language of leadership oftentimes is something, you know, we need a tool to solve this problem or something like that, and that confirms in everybody's head that we should just be looking for tools.
And it's so deeply ingrained, it's so massive in the whole approach. I mean, if you think about sort of control mechanisms at a massive scale, we've got punitive response mechanisms in terms of financial control in the world at large, and through different bodies like the FCA in London, and financial controllers in businesses and whatever else it might be. And the whole of our backdrop culture is all premised on how do we control the people that aren't behaving properly, no matter what that might be, whether that's from a criminal act point of view or not getting the best out of for the business. And the total diametric opposite of that is how do we create people and help people become think in such ways and become the right kind of person that chooses the right behaviours in the first place and doesn't want to be a criminal and defraud the government for our tax or whatever else it might be. So then if people are, and this is that compliance versus commitment argument again, if people are compliant, it's because there's some kind of punishment that can be levied upon them to keep them under control. But if people are committed, they'll do what's right in the first place, and you don't need to control them, you know. And it's that's right? Yeah, and it's way more fun and it's much nicer. And if anybody's got any teenagers, you know what I'm talking about. You know, you've got to try and help a teenager realise why it's much better to contribute to society and the family unit rather than it is to just disrupt it. And you can't just go around punishing teenagers forever by taking their phones away, because it doesn't really get you anywhere. It just puts a control culture in your family unit, which isn't very nice to be involved in. So, you know, it's about, like you say, it comes back to Dirk's initial point, develop people at a higher level of thinking with a higher level of responsibility who can make the connections to why it's nicer for them, for everybody else in society at large, to act in a better way, a different way, and then we get to a better place. So sorry, I said I wouldn't rant and I ranted, so I'm going to shush now and let everybody else have a chance to get a word in.
Yeah. Jan, you made some notes. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, do we really learn or this behavior, or do we just copy that? So I think nobody went out of university or somewhere else and say, now I become a boss to blame. So what I see is there are many thoughts in our heads. We are not really connected. So you have only a superficial understanding what's going on around you. And what TPS and Toyota is focusing in us to learn on the spot and to see it and to get an understanding how the things are interrelated. So that's why they take time. And then at a certain point, they know, well, now I have to do this and that to achieve something. And normal classical managers, they just guess. So they don't take the time to go there and think, take time to think about, because they are so preoccupied with this next transaction, so they don't have the time to learn. So maybe it's how we are educated in our school system, I don't know. do we really take time to understand things? And are we allowed to say, well, I don't know it. I need to take time to investigate that. So I'm not sure about that. There are other concepts in school and universities, but they are rarely or scattered around the globe.
Yeah, again, the copying bit is, I mean, you could link that back to mirror neurons in the brain. You know, we've got a particular type of neuron that's very good at reflecting other people, because that's how we learn empathy. We learn how to express feelings and feel for others. You know, if you see somebody on one of those comedy clip shows fall on their ass across a pole, you know, you feel it physically as well as emotionally. You go, oh, and everybody does it, you know. So, and that's mirror neurons. If we can do that because somebody falls off a skateboard, you know, we do that when it comes to leadership behaviors.
And copying is learning, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's very much equivalent, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think many managers or many employees feel alone at work. So they would say, well, I would show different behavior if I know the others would follow me, or if this behavior is accepted. So,
and that's where you come back to your second point, which is, are we allowed to say we don't know?
Yeah.
And if leaders are too scared to say they don't know because of the pressure from shareholders or equity investors or whatever it might be, and they demonstrate those behaviors, which is we've got to have an answer, then you as a manager reporting to that leader are going to think that you've got to act the same way and be in fear of being able to say, no, I don't know, I've got to go and find out and conduct some experiments. Whereas, which we all know from a lean perspective, a TPS point of view, that's exactly what they want you to do every day, is just experiment and learn from mistakes. You know, so yeah, sorry, I'm still in the limelight. I've got a particular case study in the back of my mind from many years ago, where a new American holding company bought out an SME turning over about 15-20 million. And they were so scared of not being able to tell the new American owners that they weren't meeting the targets from an order book perspective, they started putting orders forward. And thinking that, oh, we'll win some more work. And sort of 3 or 4 months in, they were working 6 months ahead, and then had to come clean, and loads of people got fired. You know, so but the problem was not the fact that they, in as much it was the problem what they were doing, but the real deeper root cause, if we're going to get into root cause of human behavior the same way as we get into root cause of mechanical problems, is the fact that they were scared to say anything in the first place. And that fear hid the truth. That's what we're always talking about. And then you talk about honesty, respect, trust, and all those things that contribute and build psychological safety. You know, we're not having this conversation in industry. We're having it on platforms like this because it's just not. I don't know. It's not allowed. It doesn't happen. We don't go into a boardroom, talk to a bunch of C-suite people, and say, "What are you doing about building psychological safety? And do you realise it's your own behaviours that cause this quite a lot of the time?" You know, it just doesn't happen just yet. And that's a part of the reason why we're doing this, is to make sure we can start to have those conversations. So thanks for being on the same page and joining us. It's good.
John, what do you think?
Up now.
John, what do you think?
Oh, it's very interesting. I recently I've been seeing the same problems in leadership in government that we're talking about in business, and the unfortunate thing is that the government are not setting the right behaviors either, and they are influencing the behaviors of the people, and there'll be more of a lack of trust in work because of the lack of trust in society, because of the way the governments are behaving and the politicians are behaving. And the politicians are behaving very much like the classical managers, aren't they, at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
it's what I characterize as the institution of leadership. It doesn't matter if it's government, for-profit business, non-profit business, a school, principal, or whatever. You see the same phenomenon when, you know, whoever is in charge. But if I can bring this back a little bit to the superficiality problem, you know, so there are followers, you know, the leaders, you know, have this tendency to say, let's find the quick and easy answer to things, and that's very appealing to followers as well. But there are some followers in an organization who will you know, do their homework and do the studying and dig deeper and to try to understand the deeper meaning and so forth. And then they try to work through the hierarchy to inform their boss and their boss's boss about the deeper meaning of things. It's not just tools and so forth. And then they experience a great deal of pushback and usually shut down. And so it's hard for these things to move forward in organizations when the people who have greater knowledge of it are shut down by the people with less knowledge of it. The followers
Well,
struggle.
it's good and bad, yeah. And I remember, Bob, you had a force triangle in one of your books, where you show, well, the only thing that you can really break is the thing where you go back to the Gemba and insist on watching on the facts.
Yeah.
So maybe you can elaborate this a little bit more. So
Well,
you have to look there.
yeah, I mean, there is putting people's nose into the problem by having them experience something on the shop or office floor, getting the leaders to participate in Kaizen. But then we always have the problem, or the typical problem, is the leaders are unwilling to do that because that's beneath their station to get involved with a Kaizen activity on the shop or office floor. It's beneath their station to interact with these people at low levels and so on. And so, this is why, for the most part, Lean is to be delegated. But in places where you can get leaders to participate in Kaizen, of course, they have a revelation. They see things and that they've never seen before. And, the common thing they'll say is, I had no idea about this. I had no idea about that. Well, in Toyota's world, you're not a good manager if you have no idea what's going on in your work area. You're a terrible manager. Doesn't mean get rid of you. It means become a better manager.
Yeah.
And it also means you need a mentor to help you become a better manager, because you need some support. You need some guidance. You need somebody to push you a little bit, to challenge you, and to make sure you remain committed.
Yeah, so you need a leader or a manager that whose behavior you can copy.
Yeah, and whose influence you will absorb, and not use your biases and preconceptions to say, no, you're wrong. We did it this way before, and so on.
Okay, so we need something like Star Trek, a new TV series that puts lean managers into the front and their behavior to copy. Then
Jean-Luc is a good leader.
I think he's a classical leader as well.
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
We have a show in the U.S. called Undercover Boss, where the
Yeah.
president of the company, goes work to make a sandwich on the front line of a sandwich shop. And I think people see more humor in that than the reality of how disconnected the bosses are from knowing what's going on. And this episode about making sandwiches, the boss says, I had no idea it was so hard to make a sandwich. But the problem is when the leader goes back to their office, they forget about this stuff. These experiences they can be transformative, but oftentimes they're not, because people have an experience, they go back to their office, they never have that experience again, and so over time it fades. They need to come back to the periodic experience, and that's what some companies do. They have a Kaizen where the senior staff is involved 3 or 4 times a year in Kaizen, so that they always have to go back to the Gemba.
Yeah, there's so much there again. My brain's gone off in about 7 different directions with that. We've got the same show, and I guess the long and short of it is, if anybody from Netflix is watching, get us involved. We'll make a show about lean leadership. Yeah, but
Maybe.
and of course, no preference for Netflix. There are other channels.
I try to promote one, yeah, but you can write to Netflix and ask, please put this or that movie onto your list, but normally they don't react. You can request it. There's a page where you can request it.
Television shows and movies can be influential, and if people saw a better way of leading and people having fun, to go back to what we said earlier, people having fun at work and so forth, then it's achievable. I mean, the best time I ever had it in my work experience was when we were doing Kaizen all the time. That was, you look forward to come to work, stay late. It was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
Could we?
I think in in physical stuff, you can do simulations. You can go to your workshop and you can use tools and the hammer on something, and then you can watch it and see it. With leadership processes or management process, there's no easy way to simulate that, and because you have to interact with people, you cannot lead alone. So there's no software or something else where you can see and get feedback.
John, what do you?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm not sure I'm as much in agreement with some comments that are made to the effect that there are only a tiny amount of lean leaders out there, because I actually experience quite a few people that I think are good leaders and companies that seem to be doing the right thing, but they are in a minority. But maybe one of the problems is that we're not differentiating them enough from the ones that are doing the wrong thing and are having classical management. They don't realize they're doing it differently. I don't know why, but just one of the comments just now, and I was thinking somebody like Tim Martin, the head of Wetherspoons chain in the UK. It's a huge hotel and restaurant bars chain. I see him as somebody that has his. Well, it was because you were mentioning about the undercover boss and the sandwiches. He gets there and employs good management staff, good staff that get down and understand what exactly is going on with the food and everything. Lidl's in the UK. I shop at Lidl's a lot, and I see the shop management there have a lot of lean behaviors, and the employees seem to have they do a lot of things that they don't have to do, but they know it's the right thing to do. And so I was just wondering if maybe we could celebrate the people that are in the right direction, maybe having an award system, or every now and again we publish something. Hey, this is an example of a lean leader that we haven't seen before, because we always talk about Amazon and Toyota. Maybe we should bring out some of these other companies that are in the right direction and give them the credit that they deserve.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, isn't it? Because again, we're always in danger, and we've had these statistics around that 70% of lean change efforts fail for the last 20, 30 years, and nobody's got any stats to back it up. So it's a little bit hearsay, and nobody defines failure, so we can never tell what was meant by the saying in the first place. Yeah. But we are prone to, the same as every human being, slip into that 70% negativity bias that we've all got as part of our defense mechanisms, and just talk about the negative because it's the easiest thing to get people engaged with. But if we could, like you say, if celebrating the positive could create a gap to highlight the gap analysis that needs to be done in terms of leadership and between effective leadership and classical leadership, if we can say blanket form that classical leadership isn't effective, then that's probably, I like that. That's a good angle to come at it from, I think.
Well,
could we create a list? Sorry.
Go on, John.
Yeah.
No.
I was going to say, could we create a list in LinkedIn as a group of companies that we would add to the very small list that we generally quote as lean management? And so we say, oh, I have evidence that this person is acting as a lean manager.
Yeah, and again, I think, and if you're talking about lean leaders and very senior lean leaders and C-suite, then for me, where I've ended up in my mind, this is just my theories. I can't claim that this is right or wrong, but where I'm at is one of the real clever tricks that I think exists in Toyota's approach to Hoshin Kanri that Akal introduced in 1958 is that the driving force, the 3 points on the left-hand side of the X matrix, that as I was taught it by Dan Ahari, who had worked with Singujutsu and all the different people through Jake Brake at Numi and all that kind of stuff. As I was taught it, so this is what I'm saying with a little bit of a caveat, I might not be right, that was 3 timelines. The driving force behind the whole focus of the C-suite and Danaher, which was the venture capital company at the time, was to drive the business to reduce those 3 timelines. And I think psychologically that's incredibly clever, because that's, if you everybody is focused on the reduction of order to cash, and this works for manufacturing. You have to twist it a bit for other environments, but order to cash, concept to launch, and raw material to finished goods. Those 3 timelines cover all the back office functions, all the R&D and engineering functions, and all the ops functions from goods in to goods out and dispatch and customer delivery. So if the C-suite is talking about timeline reduction through efficiency improvement, obviously, by application of tools and all the best practices is the way to go about it, but that forces at the top level a different set of KPIs that are linked to the overall objective of reducing time. And if you can do that, you can have a sensible conversation at every layer throughout an organization. And then the byproduct of that, through treating people well, helping them, respecting them to the point that you want to protect their precious energy, as Ono said, and getting the efficiencies up in every single step and every single contact point throughout the whole organization, the natural byproduct of that is a benefit to the finances. Then you can go and report your finances the way you normally do, you know, in terms of EBITDA or profit before tax or whichever key metrics you're focusing on then. And that really philosophically is a difference in the driving force, and the leadership belief structure is one of reducing time and driving the business by the objective of reducing time versus driving the business by the objective of increasing money. And that really makes that big difference for me. And I don't think that until we see, you know, boards of directors sitting around a table actually talking about those 3 timelines being reduced and seeing financial benefit as an outcome and not a driving force, then you're never going to see another Toyota. You're never going to see that same culture replicated, because the philosophical belief system in the leadership team is not the same.
And the timeline, improving the timeline, is normally thought to be achieved by outsourcing.
Yeah, and
Oh, that increases the timeline, isn't it?
and temp labor and zero contract hours and all the other things that are being driven by the let's get this done cheaper and faster mentality.
That's the artifact of not going to the Gemba and understanding what's going on. They don't understand the timeline. If leaders participate in Kaizen, then they see the long lead time, and then they see how it's shortened through improving the process and so on.
Yeah. And like you say, then you can't manage upwards. There's so many old sayings out there. You can't tell what you know. You know, these old sayings all exist for a reason. It's because people are frustrated by the barriers that are in place sociologically and psychologically. So if we recognise some of those things, then we can say, well, what are we going to do about it? And then we can take some of those sociological barriers away that stop people managing upwards. And what that, you know, again, I was having this conversation the other day, and it came all the way back round to, well, actually, this is like a shift in apprenticeships. When you got the guy that did the apprenticeship, that went in the drawing office, that designed the mold tool, that built it in the tool room, that put it in the press and molded it, and then had to work as a traveling tool maker or whatever else before he got into a management position, and then ended up as managing director. He had that intuitive tacit knowledge, you know. And there's downsides to that as well, of course, but it's interesting to think that, you know, the best leaders, the people that know the business backwards and forwards, are the ones that know every single element and contact point throughout the whole business from top to bottom. The danger of that is, of course, if you then think that you know it all because you've been there and done it, you're not open to new suggestions and you can shut people down. So you've got to get that balance right still. But it does link back to education that we said earlier on, and how are we teaching people, and, you know, what do we believe good looks like? Is it government funded apprenticeships that you can get a certificate in a year, or a black belt in 2 weeks, or whatever else it might be? Or is it 5-year apprenticeships because you've been there and done it and you've got loads of experience?
Black belt in 2 weeks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, online, huh?
Yeah, online.
Online black belt.
Online webinar.
Online black belt.
Learning management system.
Yeah. But I'd like to pick up John's idea of having a list. What would we do with such a list? That would be nice to think about. Is it a list that we contrast the Steve Jobses of the world, or don't look just there, look here also? Or what would we do with such a list?
The problem is, if they are really truly leaders, they probably should not want to be promoted like that, because
exactly.
A truly leader is also about. I did one post about altruism, and it was about the old CEO of, what was it, Panasonic, or let me just see what it was, because I wanted to write a post not about Toyota. About another Japanese company, because there's not just Toyota, there are not many, but it's not just. And he spoke that he is a very altruistic person. He really has some socialistic thinking in his head. And I said, well, maybe that's also very important, because look at these leaders of our typical companies. How long are they in their jobs? What do they define as making a career? Some of them, at least maybe I'm wrong, or I don't know, but some of them to me seem the target of a career is making 200,000 euro steps per job change. That's what they consider as a career. So every time, the more changes, the more companies I work for, every time there's a huge step in money. This is what they consider as a career. So what they are not real leaders. I mean, they have not. I mean, I want to be a leader because I enjoy if people follow. I enjoy if people come to me at the shop floor and say, Mr. Fischer, you know what? This was a great idea. That was really great that we did this. And we are so happy that we had the chance to try that. And look, we have now reached this level of productivity. And look, we have done this improvement over there and there and there. And by the way, we have changed this machine. We improved the layout. This is when I go down the shop floor, this is what really makes me happy. And this is what gives me satisfaction. If people call me, out of 100 meters distance, come over, I want to show you something. And this is, I mean, this is really what makes me happy. And I think I cannot tell you why it is like that, but I do not know many people like that.
Come alive.
Sorry?
It's seeing people come alive.
Exactly.
As opposed to just sort of existing at work. They come alive, and you bring the whole person to work, not just their labors, but their emotion and their intellect and their social competencies for teamwork and idea, innovation, creativity. It's a wonderful thing to see. It brings tears to your eyes when you see it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you cry because you hardly ever see it. So when you do, it's an emotional event.
Yeah. And the thing is, why would people act like that, right? If people know in their guts, right? They have a leader that want to make a 200,000 salary jump in. That's the objective. Why would you contribute to that? As a follower, as an employee, why would you contribute?
Exactly.
It doesn't.
They don't see it. They don't see it.
They don't get it. I mean, the boss gets
you can't see. You do not see the wages or the premiums that they take out of the system.
But you see how they behave. You see how they behave. And I can tell you. I could say so much. You are triggering so many ideas in my head at the moment. I could just talk you out of this room, but I keep quiet. But I had scenes in my life, where people standing in front of me, and it was about Sunday shifts. We had to work on Sunday because we were in backlog. We nearly stopped the line of one drug line at MAN in Munich, and the people were standing in front of me, and this was one of the events where I really went away and cried, because people were saying, Mr. Fischer, we are coming, but we are not coming because of the company, we come because of you. And this is the kind of things that really makes me loving this job, but there I do not know many people who act like that, and who get this support from the people, who get this followership, and it's the way how you deal with them. If you come to them and you ask them, and they feel that you are really interested in their opinion, and not just you do the show because somebody told you about kata, do kata, and now you do the kata show. They feel the difference between somebody who's really interesting and really respecting and eager to get the opinion, and then, you're right, that's a good idea. That's it. Or if somebody's just doing a show, and they feel that. They feel that. And if they see this is the showman Fischer, the showman, then they say, you know what?
Okay, so what you basically mean, the John Dennis list of respectable lean leaders is empty?
No, there are certainly a few. By the way, there are many good books. There is this great book from Philip, not Philip, from Laloux. It's his family name, a Belgian guy. Frederick Laloux, exactly. And he has a great list of companies. I do not know who the CEOs are, but he has a great list of companies. There is this crazy German guy called Nils Fleging. He calls himself a management exorcist. He's really crazy. But he's really
get on the show.
Sorry?
I like that.
Sorry?
Yeah, we should get him on the show.
He has some very good ideas. He's really much in the agile world and in the theory X, theory Y, and all many good ideas. And he talks very often about DM. It's a German drugstore. They have a really great leader. There's another German company called Trigema. They are in the textiles. He is still manufacturing polo shirts in Germany. How crazy is this? And he says, this is my philosophy. If I'm not able to get this in Germany done, I'm failing. I personally fail if I'm not able to get this business working within Germany, with a high-cost country. And this is the kind of people I think there are certainly a few. Yeah.
There are.
We need the role models. We need these names as new role models. There's not enough of them out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. There's definitely a list, but it's not the ones that change the job every year or every 2 years.
Yeah, they don't want the limelight. And the classical management leaders view these types that we're talking about as oddballs and people to ignore. I see it time and time again in U.S. business where you have somebody who's very successful. They don't like it, but they get some press that describes their method and their philosophy, way of thinking. And then this is basically ignored by leaders in the same industry for sure. And then other industry not usually followed. But to Dirk's point, to be that kind of leader where the people are like, come over here, look at the great thing we did, and you show interest and enthusiasm. It requires a kind of manager who's not tied up in meetings all the time, because to show an interest and to ask good questions and to challenge people in the right way, and to show your support and trust and understanding, you have to be. Spend most of your time on the shop floor. When I was a business unit manager, my boss had very few meetings that we had to be engaged in, and he told us, you spend your time on the floor with your people, and that's, understand their problems and find ways to improve things and work with them and so forth. And it was wonderful. Everybody got along, did great.
I've got some experience. I mean, this could sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I really am not. It's the best example I've got in my background to show. And again, we're looking at this from a follower's point of view and thinking, is there a power in followership that can influence leadership? Because we've been banging the leadership drum forever, and this is Emil's key point. And it hasn't really made that much difference. And it's the same as what Bob's noticed in all of his books. But I mean, just to give you a practical first-hand example from my own experience, I was headhunted by a CEO a few years back, and I was asked to go in and take over a company and turn it around. It was making £100,000 a month losses, right? And nobody knew why, and it was very complicated. I won't go into the details, but there had been a change of management, senior leader on site a year before, and he hadn't really made the grade, and the CEO had asked me to go in and take over. So you could imagine it was only a small team, but they were all very, very skeptical of yet another new person coming through the door of a company that's making losses. And
the
next one, and
bend and wait.
There were two key things that made a difference, and I mean, ultimately, my core team were on their hands and knees scrubbing and painting floors on Bank Holiday Monday to get the place sorted out. That is the kind of level of dedication, and we were there till 10 o'clock at night, and we did whatever it took. But there were two key things I was told after the fact that made a big difference. One was, I didn't believe their silo cleaning health and safety standards were up to scratch, so I wouldn't let anybody else take the risk, and I climbed up inside the silo to unblock the motor at the top of it to get it working again. Because I wouldn't let anybody else do it. And then the second key thing was, I got up at 5:30, drove across Suffolk, went swimming in the morning, went to the gym, then went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And some of them said, like, why? What are you doing? And my response was, I've got to be on top of my game. If I haven't got the right energy going in my brain to do what's required in support of you guys, then I'm failing you. And they really, really responded positively to that. So, it's just, like I say, I'm not saying it to beg myself up. I'm saying it to say that I had more dedication and effort put in, discretionary effort, completely of their own volition by that team than I've ever had anywhere. And it was in response to that my beliefs, and this is why I'm always go back to my BTFA model. I only did those things because I believe it's the right thing to do. I couldn't have been told to do them. And the problem was I was on the shop floor all the time. We did turn that business around, but I could not get the group finance director to make a visit. And ultimately, the conversations that the CEO and the group finance director had saw the investment team from the London pull the funds, and we had to close the business down. So I had to make 38 people redundant. So it's it has to be at the top. The belief has to be at the top.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
It's the difference between a sitting leader, a leader who sits, and a leader who walks. Right? Leader who walks is with the people and understands their problems, and a sitting leader is in meetings all the time. Emil, there's some questions, comments.
I saw them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, which one do you want to pull up?
I don't know.
I just pulled up the one from Ile.
Srikant has a number of comments here. We have to get to him as well.
Yeah. So be the change you want to see in the world, he says.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So I think we heard some examples of that. He's asking who is appointing the CEOs of big stock market companies? I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
It's not coming from the followers. It's
not from the followers, right?
Board of directors.
It's a network. It's a network of people who recommend each other. Yeah. So, and if there is, I can give you a few examples of my experience. There are big consulting companies, the Mac so and so's, and the Roland so and so's, and the Bain so and so's. All them, and they just they are just like this. They hear. There's one company, they need a CEO. Do you know somebody? Yeah, I know somebody. This guy. I'm not actually sure whether they at the end up do a proper interview, whether he would really fit or not. He was just recommended by somebody, and that's how he got this job.
Yeah, there's some great stories of basically no interview, just make the offer, get the signature, and start. And it turns out to be a completely bad person. It was wasn't it in software, or Hewlett Packard, or something like that? They had a CEO for a very short period of time. They didn't even interview him.
But then there's a massive lesson to be picked up on there, isn't there? Because if trust between people is so powerful, they can completely short circuit any system to put somebody in such a high position of power. Doesn't that shout and scream from the rooftops that trust is a really important thing to be focused on as a leader, and to build trust in your followers?
Yeah, let me pull up the definition that Toyota gives in the Toyota way about trust. This is what it reads. Sorry. This is in the Toyota Way 2001, how they explain trust.
But I think in the context in which Dirk is talking about it, trust is something that creates problems. Not solutions.
It's the trust. It's the wrong trust.
You have an impenetrable, you have a fortress, an impenetrable fortress of trust that exists in the institution of leadership. It's implicit. Yeah. If I'm a CEO, it's implicit that I'm trustworthy amongst my peers. And I may not be, but for some reason, it'll still work out that way.
Yeah.
So what would happen if some companies change to election model of CEOs? So where every employee can participate on this selection.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. Put up a few candidates and let them choose.
The bit in the middle of that sentence from Toyota there says we make every effort to understand each other. That's the bit I think is missing. We have done root cause analysis on process to death for 40 years, and we all know the tools backwards and forwards. Ask anybody to explain what happens with dopamine when it comes to motivation. And it comes back to a point that Jan was making earlier. The motivation. There's a great book out there called Driven, I think it is. It's about Lawrence and Noria. Noria is a dean at Harvard. And they wrote a book about 4 drive theory, and it's to bond, acquire, defend, and learn. And those are the 4 cardinal points on the compass of motivation psychologically. And they do a good job of digging into the psychology behind it. But it depends on what people are motivated by. Again, it depends. It comes back underneath that banner of belief. What do people believe good looks like? It always drives everything, and that's we don't get to root cause of people, and we don't put every effort into understanding each other. We do it for process, we do it for systems, we don't do it for people, and we can't do it for people until we have a different language register. And for me, that sounds like psychology and neuroscience. Until that's a normal part of our conversation, we haven't got the language register to deal with all the things that cause us the problems in business.
Shrikant has a comment here. True leaders are rare. I think we're all in agreement with that. The dilemma is that what we see as the common type of leader is a buildup over hundreds, if not thousands, of years of the idea of what a leader should be, and that the true leaders that we're referring to are rare because they go against that model, that normative understanding of what a leader is, and it's to give orders and tell people what to do and to not consort with the people down at the bottom of the organization and so forth. And the followers, again, to one of Emil's main points is we give consent to this type of leadership implicitly or explicitly, and then begs the question, how do we revoke our consent, and what are the consequences of revoking that consent in terms of us in work or personally?
Yeah, there's a guy who's called Daniel Mazik, and he wrote a book together with Mark Sheffield about inviting leadership. So instead of ordering or commanding change, they invite for change, and they speak out the invitation in a specific format. So if you get a response to the invitations, you already know if you should proceed that way or not. So I think that's a good addition to your management instrumentarium that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, have we got, when you go into a company and you look at on-time delivery and you get 7 different versions of what people think on time is depending on which department you talk to, right? Have we got to do the same thing with what we're saying here about leadership? Because I think John's point and Dirk's point stand up. Dirk listed off a few people that are good leaders. John's talking about, he knows people, he's met people. We have all met, and we've said it in one of the previous conversations. We meet good people that are good leaders that do the right thing for people. But as Bob's found, there's a bigger machine at play in which there's a bigger bubble inside which they're playing. So do we have to put some effort into what we mean with the loose language, especially the English language, around leadership, so that we can say,
we don't have the language. We don't have the language to describe the good leaders correctly. So the general public are letting the poor leaders off the hook because they don't know how to describe why they're bad. And interviewers on news programs, etc., let these people off the hook.
Well, there's hundreds of definitions of leadership, hundreds, and as a result of that, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything when you have hundreds of definitions. The Essex in the UK, Essex University on their website some years ago had just a listing of leadership definitions, and it was many pages long. It was ridiculous. It's a good list in terms of showing that.
But you've done the best job of anybody, Bob, in actually listing. These are the traits of a classical manager. These are the traits of a lean manager, right? But that education, it's only for a few right now. It's like we're preaching to the choir. I tell my classes about it. It needs to get out into the wider realm, and people can then say, "Oh, that company, that manager seems to be following those types of behaviors, whereas this company is following those types of behaviors." And what is the output? What is the output experience that we're getting from the two companies.
Mhm.
Is Richard Branson and Virgin giving us an experience that is good versus the Northeast London Railway, and who is that manager? You know, so I just feel like the people that are doing it better should be celebrated. And the customer experience. So one of the points was, well, the lean leaders might not want to be celebrated. It doesn't really matter if the output, if the products and services give great value and satisfaction to the customers will celebrate them without the managers needing to want it.
Maybe that's, in my mind, there is a different angle at this. And there are people that we say, right? There are people that manage in a proper way. Maybe we can look for ways to help them increase their impact and become less dependent on a surrounding system that requires classical management as the main behavior. So
Yeah,
so I was in an organization, a big one. I won't call the name out, but and they were teaching. There was a leader who was teaching people Toyota Kata system, and he had a group of people, and he was very rigorous in it. And I was invited to have a look there, and I said, and he asked me, what's the biggest risk for our group? And I said that you are all becoming orphans. So if you take apart this group that became educated and you transplant them all in different positions, then you lose everything that you build up, because you cannot keep this behavior in a different environment. So somehow I think you need to have the people that show the behavior that you would like to see. You have to concentrate that, and or you need to find a way to increase their impact so more people can enjoy their leadership.
Yeah, your head's going in the same sort of direction as mine, I think, which is not unusual for us when we end up talking. I mean, I came at this kind of thing through looking at the studies into mouse brains and how, you take a juvenile mouse, and I mean, the gory bit is you have to cut the top of their head off and stick 200 probes in their brain and then keep them tracked wherever they move in a maze. To be able to get a feel for how quickly their brain changes once they're picked up out of that consistent environment they've only ever known until they reach adulthood, and then they're placed in a completely novel environment with different materials, different floor types, colours, food sources, water sources, and how quickly their brains change and map the new stimulus. So that's kind of where I came at it from a neuroscience point of view, and that led into those environmental dimensions that we've talked about in the other shows, which is that physical environment, what people are exposed to, and as Bob shows in his books, the difference between a shiny boardroom table and filter coffee and a dirty, noisy old shop floor that you have to kind of get the greasy rag to wipe your hands before you can eat your sandwich. It's that physical difference, the amount of noise that's there, the amount of risk that's perceived, and it goes through the social, the systemic control and all that kind of stuff. So, and we're talking about what influences behaviors. And I mean, again, I've had some interesting conversations in the last week with a couple of guys about servant leadership. And part of that came out that some of the better studies are now showing that the predisposition, the genetic makeup that we've all got is about 40% of who we become, and who we end up being is 60% nurture, right? So it's 40% nature, 60% nurture. And that nurture bit means the stimulus that we receive from our surroundings, the outside world outside of our brains. So if we accept that, there is influence to be had from what we're surrounded by, whether you look at it from a mouse in a maze point of view, or whether you look at it from a nature, nurture, psychology and development and psychology point of view. Yeah. So there's got to be an argument to be had for process and systems having an influence on people. And that's the premise that all lean tools and techniques have been trained under ever since, since for day dot, because it's, if we go in and teach somebody a tool, we'll change what they're exposed to and it will change the way they behave. But it doesn't, because the way in which it's done provokes that negativity response, that defense mechanisms being triggered. So people put barriers up against it. And once you've got a story in your mind that says this is wrong and I'm right, normally, everything you experience after that you will frame in such a way as to make it wrong so you can remain right. So if you alienate somebody with your first 30 seconds of meeting about introducing lean tools and techniques, you'll fight an uphill battle from that point forward. And all of that is a pre-qualification for the point I actually want to make, which is, this is why I think Hoshin Kanri and those kind of higher level leadership development strategic models really, really work if you get them right, because they force, in a nice kind of way, through believing in it passionately, right, that genuine commitment to that approach to leading a business forces leaders to have to reflect the right behaviors. And it gives that immediate feedback for all the people that are involved in trying to make the business better. And it ticks all the boxes from the language from top floor to shop floor. And it connects all the KPIs to take away the kamikaze Kaizen events. And it stops the target-driven behaviors because it's not driving things from the right way. You know, and there's so many psychological reasons why a good strategy deployment model makes the difference to the lean leadership and the followers and the performance of the business. But it's so, you know what I mean, there's that behavioral piece, that capacity to help leaders form habits that are better for those around them, so that they are consciously creating the conditions in which other people can perform at their best. There's definitely a systems bit to that as well we've got to consider, I think.
Is there, Jan, is there anything like that? I don't know if you know what the Hoshin Kanri or policy deployment is, but if you do, is there anything like that in an Agile Scrum world?
No, we take the same mechanisms. OKRs are very popular now in that environment.
What is it? What is it?
Objectives and key results, the
okay.
Intel and Google thing.
Yeah, because to David's point, if Hoshin Kanri is done right, it acts like a disciplining mechanism
for
the
know.
leaders of the organization and the followers, and disciplining in a good way. It gives you focus, direction, achievable things that are achievable that accrue to the overall benefit of customers and so on. Anyway.
All the attributes of Toyota Cat. Sorry, Dirk, you've been trying to get a word in.
Yeah, I have so many things in mind.
Yeah,
so I don't know where to start. To the last point with the Hoshin Kanri and the policy deployment. Again, this is more like a concept or a process or whatever you want to call it. But this itself will not make it if the people who are working with it are not having the right mindset.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite statements is when I talk in front of people and I try to give them my vision of abnormality. What I explain, you can do an FMEA and you can do an FMEA. The one thing is I'm just filling the boxes. So what? Or I can really do an FMEA and really sit with the real guys, with the real expertise, with the right competences, intensively, many, many hours, and really want to fix and to fix any potential risk we are think of, and where do we put Pokayokers and where do we do SPC, and so, and it's the same thing with every kind of tool. You can do it or you can do it. And the difference is the people doing it. The difference is the quality how you do it. There are so many companies in the world, they will tell you, we do TPS, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah, but they do it somehow. They do the visual things. They have the boards, they have the nice floors, they even have the U cells. And then if you go there and ask some easy questions and scratch a little bit, you'll find out there's nothing behind. It's only the visual bullshit.
Yeah, that's...
So this is, and that leads me to the other point that John said with the language. And I think, I'm not saying that I'm right, please, but I'm just thinking about it. Is it really a question of language? Because there's probably no other topic in the business world like lean where that was written so much about. But I don't know how many thousand books we have about lean, Toyota, whatever. Yeah,
I know.
And is it really? Can it be a question of language, Or
So I would answer that. See, I've got a real strong belief that it is the language, and I'll try and explain why to answer your point.
okay,
Yeah, there's tens of thousands of books out there, right? But they've all been written about tools and techniques. Some of them talk about Hoshin Kanri, some of them talk about change management.
Yeah.
But they're all there's huge volume of language within boundaries. But I think perhaps what we're talking about is the language that exists outside those boundaries that isn't being used in the description of those books, so that you're not, like I said, so if we talk about process and systems and technology, you can find 1,000 books on every single one of those points. Try and find a book about the systems psychology of lean management or leadership. They don't exist. They're not there. So it is about language, and it's about the language register. You know, and I always go back to Wittgenstein's famous quote, which was, "The limit of my language is the limit of my world." And he also went on to say, if you speak 2 languages, you speak, you know, 10. You're tenfold the person that you can be speaking one. And again, the more you know about Japanese language, the more richness you can see in the pictograms and ideograms of the kanji characters. And I think there's a big disconnect between Western language sets and Eastern language sets that use pictograms that make a big difference in the way they're processed in people's heads as well. But I like the point you made before that about whether people, I think for me, I'd use the word engage, whether people are genuinely engaging with like FMEA. Everybody calls it a dry subject, but actually, you know, you can get into some really interesting engineering stuff if you're running FMEA. But that goes back to the ADAPT model that we spoke about in the second episode, which was whether people are aware of a need for change and whether they've got that language register so they can actually talk about a subject and integrate it into their worldview, and then whether they've got the desire, whether psychologically having that awareness triggers them to go towards a future state or away from a future state emotionally within themselves. And it's the same thing, you know, if you want to do an FMEA exercise, there are people doing it because they've got to tick a box and show in the face, which, and again, Japanese, that's the tatame and hone. You know, the tatame is you go into the barbers, you get a really, really bad haircut like this, and you smile and bow and you go, "Thank you very much for my haircut," and you walk out because you're protecting the honor of the barber. And then you get outside and you swear under your breath and promise never to go back there. And that's the tatame is the honesty, and the hone is the reality. And I think it's a concept we don't really have the language for in the West. So, you know, if we can talk about, that's what I mean by a difference in language. It's the language register.
Okay.
It's the breadth of language. So,
John,
can I just close my loop? My loop? Okay, so I just thought about when did I actually learn something? And I detected myself. I have made my own experiences. You know, I think this is also, by the way, another very, very important element. If you are not been through it personally, you cannot teach this in classrooms and all that. I think this is not working. You really have to do it yourself. For many, many years, it's not a question of a few months or something like that. It's really about experience and seeing the things yourself. So now coming back to the point of learning. I've seen the things, I reflected every day, why the hell is it not working? What is the problem, and so on. And then I have my theories, why is it wrong? And then suddenly at one time I read a book. And in this book, somebody explains exactly that. And he says, well, so and so as it should be. And I said, shit, I was right. I was not wrong. I was right. So this is what actually made me learning when I see the words, the written words are actually in line with my real life experience. You know, that is what made me really learning, and what made me over the years more and more robust in my thinking. Whether it's the right thinking or not, I'm not sure. But at least it made me more and more robust in a certain way of thinking. And this is why I think it cannot be just language. It has to be the combination of maybe language and your real life experiences, your real day-to-day activities, how you solve problems, and working together with the people, and all these kind of things. Yeah, because otherwise I think it language alone will not do it. That's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And I kind of let me just come back to you one point. And I would say, well, I think this is going to go on this episode, but it's worth it because it's really interesting. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. Although, and I think this is the problem with language, and sometimes we don't put enough effort in and give it enough time to go around the houses and find out how we're aggressively agreeing with each other. You know, because sometimes it can sound like we're saying different things, but we're not. We just got different ways of expressing it. So the way I'm framing what you just said, the way I'm interpreting it into my language set, is that you're talking about confirmation and reinforcement of your own thinking based on your own experience. What that does is that increases your confidence. So you're, like you said, the robustness of your thinking. And for me, that's about increasing self-concept. And our own self-concepts are deeply imprinted from childhood and all the other stuff that comes from psychology. So it's literally taking away the fear. And that's why I like Deming's point 8, drive out the fear, because it's the fear that we've got in ourselves about being wrong. So that, you know, and when we get rid of that, then we've got the confidence to speak out as we are now. You know, we've all got 20 years experience, 30 years experience behind us. And that's probably why we're the 6 people that have ended up in this room having this conversation to speak out against the rest of industry, to say, hang on a minute, guys, there's something not working here and somebody's got to do something about it. You know, it's confidence, it's self-concept, and self-concept comes from encouragement, support, you know, good leadership again. You know,
it's also self-development. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I fully agree. Yeah. Sorry for my English. So you said it much better than I said, but it's exactly that. Yeah.
No, we said it the same way. Nothing's wrong with your English. The problem is there's a problem with English, because English is quite a language that allows a lot of assumptions to be made, which is why we have so much trouble being clear with each other. It's not your English, it's just English in general.
I'm always curious, if I translate German text into English text, the German text is that long and the English text is that long. There has to be a problem.
Definitely.
Okay. John, do you want to chip in?
No, that's good. I agree with the conversation there. Thank you.
All right. Well, what I was thinking about language, right? I mean, language is made up of words somehow, but I think we also, everybody has a different concept behind the word. What does it really mean?
Absolutely.
And so there's this expression in Dutch which translates pretty difficult, but it says something like communication is talking along each other as short as possible, with the shortest possible distance. Which it's really hard to ever understand someone, because somehow, what's the concept behind the words?
Yeah.
And for example, if I read Bob's book, I have to use a dictionary as well. There's so many new words there. But I'm learning more English in that way.
Yeah.
Bob, are you running out of time?
Hey, on a call.
I'm okay. I just got to tell somebody to come in a little bit later.
All right. Yeah, we are overrunning a little bit, but I think the conversation was worth it.
Yeah, I think I can see another message from Ellie there on the thread, the live comments. Will a new trend or awareness build back better be possible change towards companies striving for stakeholders' value and therefore progressive management, bottom up trust and confidence? So I think again the term you've used there triggers my thoughts in terms of build back better. Having some interesting conversations with a lot of clients at the moment about, you know, very positive, forward-looking CEOs, including those that have got accolades from the Queen over the years, talking about the positivity in which we can think about the current situation and getting back to work. And, you know, that again, it goes back to mindset, but building back better is probably where we need to get to. Everybody's thinking about getting back to normal, getting back to the new normal is the phrase that everybody's getting bored with. But, you know, how do we end up with these barriers in our brain that is just what we know already is good enough? You know, where's that visionary capacity to go, look, we've had a massive interruption to the way we do business. It's made us rethink everything. What can we do differently now? You know, anyway, that just seeing your phrase build back better there, Ellie, is what's you've made me go off on a different tangent yet again. But
I think we have to look for the new mental models or different mental models. For example, Kate Raworth wrote a book about economy, and there she dissects classical economical models like the Homo economicus and stuff like that. So if we understand how far these models have shaped our thinking, then we are able to look for new images or mental models or Gestalt, as psychologists say.
Yeah, that breakthrough thinking that also is built into Hoshinkanri and all those kind of planning models. It's still there. And Emil, introduced me to the Toyota drive for promoting dreams in kids all over the planet. There's the genuine belief in this kind of how do you get people to think differently. When that becomes your driving and overarching purpose, it makes so much difference to what you do. And Toyota demonstrate that, as Ali's last comment that's on the screen there now. True behaviour does more than 1,000 words. Toyota live and breathe this stuff. Not wanting to put them on a pedestal, because having read Darius Mary's account of what he experienced in Japan, there's plenty of dark sides to it as well. But I think there's a combination. We can learn so much from what Toyota did through TPS. We can learn so much of what everybody else did, and combining it with some of the best practice and the good things we do in the rest of the world, we could have a really, really fantastic business model, but we just haven't brought it all together yet. But dreams is a big part of it.
There's an interesting comment, by the way. This is really what I wanted to say earlier as well. I'm not sure whether everybody sees it.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. 1,000 words, right? The picture says more than 1,000 words. So Toyota is teaching dreams by creating an art contest.
But not everybody's going to experience Toyota's behavior. And we keep talking about Toyota as the example. If we had examples, like I said, Pret-a-Manger coffee stores, if they are better, if they're practicing better lean leadership behaviors, customer satisfaction, worker satisfaction, more people in Britain are going to experience Pret-a-Manger or Starbucks than they are Toyota. So let's make some flagship companies that people actually experience on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good shout. Let's pick all the top brands and go and work with them.
Yeah, I mean, if Sports Direct gets a bad name, okay, make that the poster child of poor management, and let's make Pret-a-Manger a poster child of good management.
So we need badges. We put badges on the good shops that we want to see.
Why not? Something that's along those lines. I mean, it's just
something.
Great idea. I mean, we need examples, and we need to help.
Zara is an example of good.
Yeah.
Lean processes, Zara, right? And I bring up Zara, but whenever you quote Toyota, think about instead quoting Zara, because Zara's in every town,
and all the ladies know it.
Yeah, they all know it, right? So what is Zara doing differently, and what is the behavior of management in Zara, and what's your customer experience at Zara compared to a Sports Direct?
I'll tell you what then, because I'm thinking conscious of time, just to be sensible for everybody, and I did have another call I needed to get onto, but ignoring that fact, shall we put a call out that anybody that sees this, and if you guys can all share the links and say that it was good, bad, or indifferent being here with us, can we ask anybody that comes across this video to get in touch and give us some examples, positive examples, where you've seen good stuff, and we'll shout it out. We're on here, maybe something we can do just to get the ball rolling and see where it takes us.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good for me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Seems to be a good closing remark as well, isn't it?
Yep.
All right. Thank you all for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. And
yes,
very
much. Yep.
Well, time flies when you're having fun. So we satisfied the first ambition is to have some fun, I think. So
yeah, you even didn't have time to finish our beers, is it?
No. Thanks for joining us, guys. Yeah, real pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I mean, it's really awesome to talk with you and to also find out that we're not alone in this. I mean, there are more people that are still thinking there, and that. Right?
Yeah, and thanks for everybody listening as well and for the comments. It helps the conversation flow. So appreciate you turning up.
Indeed.
All right. I guess we will do a next episode. We will reach out to announce it or some. We will be back.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Good stuff.
Take care.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Have a great
Good.
weekend. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.